Interrupt the honourable member
Expressway.
as time has expired. Dr. Jackie Blue.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased to speak to second reading of the Road User Charges Bill, which basically is very straightforward and it modernises a very old bill that was first devised in 1978. And certainly submission supported the need for modernisation updating, and I commend this bill to the House. Thank you.
The Honourable Rick Barker.
Mr Speaker, I've been quite intrigued by this debate. I'm probably one of the few people in this House who's driven a heavy truck. I'm licensed to drive one, and I have, over the years, grappled with the complexities of the law as such. And so looking at this piece of legislation, I have... Oh, excuse me? I thought the member was a biking. I'll come back to that in a moment. One thing that truckers don't like a lot of other groups, is paying tax. That's reasonable.
That's why they voted Labor out.
That's reasonable. Everybody would like to pay less tax rather than more. And truckers know that they pay quite a lot of tax. But when I reflect upon it as being a person who rides a bike, I pay quite a lot of tax as well when I ride my bike. And the thing that I feel is important here is that the rates which are charged on trucks are there to reflect the amount of damage they do to the road. It should be proportionate. And if you reflect on the amount of tax that I pay riding my bike in terms of excise duty with trucks, then I think as a motorcyclist I'm worse off. Because a large 18-wheeler who's carrying a full load, I'm advised from research I saw in the States, is equivalent to 160,000 cars. Well, as riding a motorbike, I would say that it would be equivalent to 4 times that amount, the damage which is done. Well, I can't see the trucks are paying something close to 700,000 times the amount of money tax that I pay riding my bike. So on one side, the argument is the trucks are not paying enough. But having put that aside, we then look at the change of the system here. And my colleagues have picked up a very good point, that we are changing the system from nominated weights to maximum weights. Now, I did drive a truck one time which had quite a large maximum weight, but it had a much lighter nominated weight because I was carrying full loads of polystyrene. Now, the truck was capable of carrying many tonnes, had a very long tray, but it was fully laden with polystyrene. Well, there's not much lighter than polystyrene. Now, thinking about that truck, if it's going to be to its maximum weight, then that truck is going to be paying substantially more under the new system than what it would under the old system. And my colleague agrees. So you can see a truck driver who's got polystyrene would feel very much aggrieved because it's volume, it is not weight. Whereas you can have the same truck with a much less volume carrying steel, and that is very heavy, as is concrete. So the point that's been made by previous speakers is that we have had a trucking fleet which has been bought and paid for around the road user charges system. People have bought trucks which have been able to carry much heavier loads, but they've never intended to carry much heavier loads on them. They've intended to carry light loads and they wanted to carry volume. And this was efficient and economic because they could therefore buy road user charges equal to the weight that they had nominated. Now, every trucker knows that you've got to be careful about the weight that you nominate because the load can vary. The truck can be carrying pallets. Now, pallets of goods will have a certain weight, but the trucker knows that you have to be careful that the pallets are measured when they're wet, not always dry, because if you measure the weight of your truck when they're dry, then you get a lighter load. So truckers are always careful to measure their trucks according to the weight they are likely to carry. And so might have 6 tonnes on the truck, which is capable of carrying 20. Well, under this current regime, the truck driver is going to be charged 20 tonnes rather than... Sorry? Doesn't matter. Well, it's going to be much more expensive. Now, the issue that I've heard my colleagues raise here is a lack of consultation about this. And the issue that the industry have raised is that these charges are not going to be set by statute. They're going to be set by officials making recommendations to the minister, who's then simply going to promulgate them. And the question here is, what is the fairness or the democracy in that? The trucking industry are deeply suspicious about that, and I think they have a right to be deeply suspicious. Of course, the Cabinet rules require that there is consultation, but consultation can be done poorly and it can be done well. The government of the day, the National Party, would most probably say, well, if we make regulations, then they have to go to the Regulations Review Committee. But that can be quite some considerable time after the regulations have been put in force and people have had to pay. And then if the Regulations Review Committee decides that they are unfair, the Regulations Review Committee can then nominate that the regulation be struck down. But that has to come back to the House, and there's a vote on it. And the vote is going to be of the parties in this House. Now, who can imagine that the national government and its support parties are going to vote down regulations that their own ministers have put forward? This is being your own judge and jury of your own case. And I can well understand why the trucking industry is very concerned about this process. I have similar concerns to them.
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. The time has come for me to leave the chair. This debate is interrupted and set down for resumption next sitting day. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m.